Uh, what I wanted to talk about this morning is kind of covering some territory that I covered some weeks back when I talked about Soto Zen universalism. So, as it turns out, the teachings I had to share this morning involve a universalist poem and some very important Soto Zen teachings. So I'll begin with the poem, which comes from a collection of poems of Kamau Daoud, titled The Language of Saxophones. So a lot of his works have figured into kind of live performances. You'll kind of get that gist from the nature of this poem, which is called One. Pretty appropriate for a universalist themed poem. And an opening quote, before we get into the poem, he heads it up with a quote from Duke Ellington. Every person prays in their own language. There is no language that God does not understand. So here's the poem. Buddha played the Lord's Prayer on Krishna's flute. To the bata drums of Shango in praise of Allah. Sufi dervish swirl in Yari's ecstasy, dressed in white, transcending with tambourines in storefront churches, chanting Om in tongues. Dreadlock women in saffron robes quote Muhammad with Bibles and beggar bowls, with hands clutching prayer beads. Missionary Zen masters chew peyote at the foot of the Kaaba, singing Amazing Grace. Holy rollers study the Kabbalah on Persian rugs, practice yoga in the pyramids as a shaman sits in a lotus in front of a computer translating bird songs into Swahili. Monks make ablutions in sacred waterfalls and dance ancient dances in praise of Ra. Incense and candles, roses and sacred books, rum bottles and Tibetan gongs at the foot of a blind man painting icons on the walls of skyscrapers. Buddha played the Lord's Prayer on Krishna's flute to the bata drums of Shango. One God, one worship, one sacred place, one holy book, one worshiper, one. And if I give myself enough time at the end, a number of his poems are also jazz themed, and he has a wonderful one in here about Charlie Parker. So I'll see if we can fit that one in too. Since I realized I had left something very important out of my Soto Zen Universalist description, that being jazz. So it needs to be Soto Zen Jazz Universalist. That's the true spiritual path. So now we can get into some real Soto Zen teaching. On exactly the same day that Ben Connolly's book came out, back in July, I guess it was, another even more important book came out, and that's Becoming Yourself, Teachings on the Zen Way of Life, which is a collection of transcribed talks that were given by our first ancestor in America, great teacher Shunryu Suzuki Roshi. It's been quite a while since the last volume of his teachings came out that was titled Not Always So. Just off the top of my head, I'm going to say that might go back 15 or more years. So this becomes then, to my knowledge, the fourth volume of his teachings. The first one, and by far and away the best known, is Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And then Branching Streams Flow in the Darkness, which was a collection of his teachings on Sandokai from our chant book. Not Always So, and Now Becoming Yourself. So I thought it would be of interest, because as I look through the text, trying to pull a couple of themes for my talk this morning, it kind of dawned on me right away that, boy, this really weaves in very nicely with what we've been studying. So hopefully you'll see some connections here as well. Before we get into Suzuki's own teachings, there is an introduction which is provided by the person who ultimately made the final selections and did the final editing work, Shunryu Suzuki. But she was actually went into this in partnership with Mel Weitzman, but he died some years ago, and this kind of got set aside. There was question whether it would ever get completed, but the decision was made. This is too important, even with Mel no longer being involved, that it needed to get completed. So we can all be grateful that did, in fact, happen, as I find this to be such a rich collection of teachings. But what would we expect coming from Suzuki? So, it's kind of one of those satisfaction guaranteed deals. When you order the book, you know it's going to be good. So from the introduction, and this kind of sets the stage for the main topic of Suzuki's teachings contained here. Just to be yourself is what is meant by just to sit. So just to sit, shikantaza, is to just be yourself. This, in fact, could be said to be the core of what's being presented in this book. And in its wider sense, it's simply about opening to your life. So we talk about zazen and practice as being open, opening ourselves up to our life. And to see that as truly becoming yourself, being yourself. We've used terms like authentic, sincere in the past here, pointing to this same theme of being yourself. And from this practice of becoming yourself, so with that being the source, directly and naturally flows the Bodhisattva precepts, the principles of compassionate, beneficial action. So this isn't becoming yourself, isn't to become self-centered, in other words. That to truly become yourself is to see the interconnectedness and to live your life in accord with that. So the introduction goes on to say, it points the way to a life of true caring that is grounded not on allegiance to a rigid ideology or fixed moral code, but on ongoing, authentic contact with our innately loving and connected heart. That's all wrapped up in becoming yourself. Really and truly. So to be yourself is the way to keep the precepts and not keep them as a rigid moral code, but to take them into your heart and to be able to apply them naturally in the course of your daily activities. And the last point from the introduction I felt I needed to include a description of Suzuki, that he was always serious, but he was always funny at the same time. I mean, that's gorgeous. It always had an element of happiness or joy in it. And when I was reviewing this and pulled that out to include in what I share this morning, was still fresh after this past Thursday at Whitehaven, when I always wait until about 5 minutes after 1 o'clock before we get started, because always a late person or two to show up. And as of late, they usually beat me in there. When I get in there, usually there are 4 or 5 people already there. So this Thursday, 2 of them in particular were kind of cracking on each other, and it was a lot of jollity. And they got to laughing so hard. They both had breathing issues, so the inhalers had to come out. And we're about to get started. So I'm concerned now personally that, boy, how's this gonna be for them? They induced a breathing issue. But I was amazed. I mean, it was the quickest calming down ever. And my comment to them was to hold on to that joy, but combine it with the peacefulness, that sense of deep relaxation. Let those two come together in joy. And it ended up, usually I do a fair amount of guiding through the meditation, but I think I spoke once in the course of, and I have them sitting for 30 minutes now. And there was just one very short interval where I said anything. And I told them at the end of that, I said, I just had the feeling that silence was the best way to go today. So that sense of joy, to be able, I just saw it as, at that time, as a rich opportunity. There was a lot of joy in that room, so I wanted them to hold on to that. And hoping that they would be able to do that while also dropping deeper into meditation. Yeah, they pulled it off. So it's an amazing group of folks. All right, so let's move on. That's it from the introduction. Let's look at Suzuki's own words. And again, this resonates especially for me and the teachings I give at Whitehaven. The first comments from Suzuki that I wanted to share with you, where he says, because we have so much useless rubbish in our mind, It is hard to share our feeling experience with people, with things, with trees, or with mountains. So, in other words, in the context of this, the overarching theme of this book, it's hard to become ourselves because of all the rubbish. So, in terms of the practice of Zazen, it's to see the rubbish as it's coming up and to let it go. To let it go. With the ultimate outcome being that that the flow of rubbish starts to get shut off, reduced dramatically, not completely shut off, but greatly reduced. And we become more apt to be able to see rubbish as rubbish, and then immediately just kind of be able to let it go. Whereas without a practice that's so focused, we do kind of begin to drown in the rubbish. So that's why it seems so vital that we have a practice such as the one that we follow, so that we can share our feeling/experience with people, with trees, mountains, whatever we encounter. And when we can really appreciate the feeling of the woods, that is Zazen. Really appreciate it. Because part of that appreciation, kind of a precondition for it, is that dropping off of the rubbish. Otherwise, we walk through the woods and it's still just rubbish kind of in the tumbler, getting tumbled over and over and over. And that caused me to go pull off a volume from the shelf. The Japanese Art and Science of Shinrin-yoku, now popularly known as forest bathing. I know the organization I had a long-term relationship with, Shady Brook, has a woman here locally who leads forest bathing programs, and they've sponsored her on a couple of occasions. So I highly recommend it. It's beautiful photographs in here too, like such as this one.
Who's the author of that?
What's that?
Who's the author?
The author is a doctor, and I'll just spell it out: Qing and Li, Li.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then I get a chuckle, which you'll probably share from the inscription from the person who gifted this to me. Perhaps this is the only book you don't have. I hope you enjoy it. So to be able to really appreciate the feeling of the woods, which is what forest bathing as a practice is about, is to be able to, and with our Metro Park system, or my own favorite temple, and I consider it a temple, is Holden Arboretum, which is really going into the forest. That these are sacred places, and to appreciate the feeling that they evoke in us. Because when we can let the rubbish settle, we do become our true self. And when our true self encounters these special experiences. It's not just limited to being in nature. There are plenty of experiences. In fact, one could very justifiably say basically all experiences, but there is something about being in the woods because we're kind of just in that act, we're leaving behind the human created aspect of our world, which is the let's face it, the dominant creator of the rubbish. So we're going into a very conducive environment for letting the rubbish go and to be able to commune with our life at a much deeper level just by being in such an environment. So Suzuki speaks on this topic a little bit further. He says, our life is going on and on, endlessly filled with rubbish. It's not rubbish at first, though. At some moment, it's important to you, but it's not necessary to hold on to it past that point. So this importance of being present, of presencing, which I talked about last week, that is what we do when we're doing Zazen, Kinhin. We're presencing. We're being in this moment and not carrying our bag of stuff from many previous moments that we are constantly carrying around with us. But we can be fully in this moment. And then be able to let that moment go. But with each moment, as we've already seen from the introduction, being able to bring this practice of being with others with us. So we are ready for each encounter, that it will be a caring encounter. And it will be with loving kindness, with compassion, sharing joy. And Suzuki goes on, brings Shakyamuni into this mix and gives expression of something I really love. He said that we say the Buddha attained enlightenment, but it may be better to say he completely forgot everything. The key to being in the moment. So that when he did see the morning star, as the story about his initial enlightenment comes down to us, seeing that morning star, it's like it arises in that empty mind and that connection, just like the forest bathing. The morning star out of just appears. And it becomes so much more significant rather than trying just kind of merging in with the garbage that's floating around, and it loses its full impact. So the importance of letting go, which is another way of saying forgetting, let it go. And have that open. An open mind is a free mind. It's a clear mind. And it is ready to encounter things in that way. In that way. So, Suzuki again, further elaborating on this, tells us that is why he had such joy at the sight of the morning star. And this is the same joy that we can feel in all of our various experiences. Because joy is part of that picture when we are truly ourselves. And we become truly ourselves with that clear mind. And really experience things directly at the source. So he further says, we meditate, recite Buddha's name, as some traditions do, or read scriptures on the one hand in order to empty our mind, and on the other hand, in order to appreciate Buddha's words that arise from empty minds. So in this sense, the Buddha, this is what makes him and others through the lineage teachers, is because they have forgotten. They have this clarity of mind. And that's the meaning, in essence, behind their words, is to point that way for others. So he says the purpose of our practice is to open up our mind. That's zazen. We sit with an open mind, not knowing what's going to arise, but meeting it openly, without attachment and without pushing away. With the open hand of thought. And we should let go of the kind of mind that discriminates, dirty or clean, right or wrong. The point is to let go of discrimination, he says. Because that's part of that rubbish that's circulating around. Our judgmental mind, which is all built upon the edifice of discrimination. And getting right to the point of what's being described here, he says there is no reason why we should practice zazen, which we've also recently talked about. But there's no reason. We just sit. That's what just sitting is pointing to. Is we don't sit in order to accomplish this, this, and this, but rather we just sit. The sitting in such a fashion is what generates the opening, and then our life can truly unfold. But we approach it just to sit. End of story. Literally end of story. Because our stories are built up out of the rubbish. And then he talks about the difference between art in general and Zen art. In Zen art, full concentration is put on one dot, on one line, just this. And he says, if you see how they do it, you will understand. And there's a real power to that. People coming from that tradition. So this past Monday in my email, I had called to people's attention exhibit. It has a few more weeks left to go, of work by a Chinese American, but it's ink painting, and it's powerful. It's powerful, especially the main piece. That the rest of the exhibit kind of is there supporting that main piece. So if you haven't seen it yet, put in another plug for it in terms of this notion of Zen art. And that I have no idea if Mr. Chang is a Zen Buddhist. I wouldn't rate the likelihood of that high, but regardless, you know, that's part of the culture. It kind of becomes, just like Christianity's kind of become part of our culture, even among the agnostics and atheists in this society. I mean, it just goes pretty deep. So the Asian arts have much more tendency, I think, to have this approach, regardless of whether someone is actively practicing. You know, some jazz musicians that I have some familiarity with, some do have active Buddhist practices. Others are just, you know, part of their practices is this opening, which is kind of leads you to having a more spiritually oriented life. So even the term Zen art that Suzuki is using here is kind of coming from his own background. You know, so even the term Zen art is kind of discriminating. So somebody attending the talk should have pointed that out. But I think it's entirely possible, aside from any active practice, to have this approach, because you know people do clearly, whether it's in visual arts or musical arts or any field of art, move arts, performing arts. But the artistic realm is a very special place where this element of spirituality can have such a powerful output that really connects with people in a way that goes beyond words, except for the poets. But then the poets are using words in much more open ways. So they're taking creative license, you might say, with our linguistic toolbox and stretching our minds through words in a way that requires some opening that they then share to help others open. So they're kind of like Buddhist teachers, and all artists can serve that kind of a function, I think, to be able to open people's minds. You know, the really good artists, whatever their field is, do that. And that's one of the reasons why, you know, I immerse myself as much as I do in the arts, because I gain such rich sustenance from that. Absolutely. Because the true artist is manifesting themselves. And that can't help but rub off on the art appreciator, the audience that's really connected to that, able to experience that connectedness with the work. and with the artist. And of course, this again is something that we can then carry with us into daily life and experience that same sort of connection, not just with the artists out there, but with everybody, because we're all artists of our lives. Take that more broadly. It's just that within the realm of art, it has a focus to it, just like the world of Dharma. So I try to bring other non-Dharma topics into play, so that we don't become overly attached to what we call Dharma, which is to engage in discrimination. But the field of Dharma is such a rich way to be able to open our mind. So that's why I'm delighted to serve as a Dharma teacher and have knowledge and experience in sharing it. But at the same time, wanting to, this is the universalist aspect to it, is to be able to open that up so that the Dharma becomes truly boundless. It's not limited to one tradition, one set of teachings, but rather it becomes something that we can see in everything that comes up. Those boundless Dharma gates that are always opening. And now to kind of pull in the teachings of the Huayan. And I can see now that I'm running a little bit over. So there won't be the Charlie Parker poem, maybe, but I think these teachings from Suzuki are pretty important. So we'll stay on track with that. When you become you yourself, at that moment, your practice includes everything. Exactly what we've been talking about, about in this moment, the immeasurable eons, everything. When you become you yourself, is our ability to fully be in this moment. The way Suzuki had just talked about in Zen art, being in this moment with this line, this brush stroke, or in music, this note. So we're opening ourselves to the fullness, to the boundlessness. And the understanding that whatever there is, it is a part of you. That's part of our experience, and experiencing things, is they become part of us then. And we can't truly experience that when we're just processing the rubbish. Because a key part of that rubbish is the judging mind. So there are some things where we're okay connecting with, and other things we don't want to connect with. And the arts can take it all in and give expression to it. That's what makes it so rich, is to be able to practice non-discrimination in such a way. So, and then another direct linkage to the Huayan teachings we're looking at, you practice with everyone in the future and in the past. So these immeasurable eons throughout the course of time. There's no longer this discrimination between past, present, and future. And Suzuki then quotes Dogen as saying that if your practice doesn't include everything, it's not real practice. That's a good piece of Dharma to retain. When you forget all about ideas and just practice, then at that time, your practice is perfect. It includes everything. Forgetting, letting go. Forget all about ideas and just practice. What is that practice? Just being present with clarity. And your practice is perfect. You know, I wanted to say a word or two, and then maybe I'll bow out. But you know, perfect calls to mind the paramitas, and I wanted to discuss that just briefly in this regard. The paramitas are the perfections, and let's just look at dana, generosity, the first of the paramitas. We come to that with ideas about it. And that's not the dana paramita. The dana paramita, in connection with what Suzuki was talking about and what I'm trying to express here this morning, is with clarity of mind, forgetting all your ideas about generosity. And the activity of being generous is simply a natural thing. It's generosity beyond generosity. It's beyond our ideas about generosity. And so it is with all of the paramitas. Virtue, virtue beyond virtue. You know, aren't I a good boy? Look what I did. It's just being oneself. Period. End of story. All the rest of it is rubbish. It starts getting tossed around the tumbler. All the way up to wisdom. We have a lot of thoughts about wisdom. Plenty of them. But to let that all go. And wisdom is just a natural outgrowth of this presencing. And living our lives. That's why compassion, wisdom, same thing. Just looked at from two angles. So just like virtue, which we could see as being roughly parallel to compassion, virtue is, as a perfection, is just virtue. It's just natural, living our lives in this fashion. So we can live a rich life, letting go of all those ideas and just be yourself. Period. Drop everything else. To do that means trusting yourself. And that's important. Real important. Trust yourself. So Doug, you're just coming in time for, we're getting ready to chant out here. But it has been recorded. So anything anybody wanted to share before we do chant out? Okay, let's go ahead then. May our intention equally penetrate every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way. Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable, I vow to become it.
Hey, Dean,
Yeah,
I actually do have a question. Is it
okay.
too late?
No. It's never